All right, let's talk some soccer. The Union are about to start their playoffs. They're the top seed in the Eastern Conference and will open against the Chicago Fire this weekend. Who better to break it down with than the radio voice of the Philadelphia Union, Dave Leno? What's going on, Mr. Leno?
Good afternoon, guys. Jason, Jeff, thank you so much for having me. Really pumped and fired up, as you both know, for the playoffs. I'm excited for a big, gargantuan Union run to MLS Cup, which would be at our place this go around.
That's the fun of this. All right, let's go through this. So they enter the postseason as the top seed in the Eastern Conference, dominant regular season. They captured the Supporter Shield, and I want to ask you about that first because that trophy is different than other trophies in sports. I saw pictures of everybody from players with it to fans with it to you and your family with it. So explain the Supporter Shield and how cool the experience was for everybody to be able to share that together.
It's a really meaningful moment for the club and for this team. And I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity with my wife, Tori, and my son, Hudson, who's now 5, and really into the Union. He was born when we first won our first Shield back in 2020. He was born in January 2020. For him to hold it and touch it with me, that was really meant a lot to us and kind of my journey with the Union now in my 10th season. And for those that don't know what that supporter shield is all about, that encapsulates the whole 34 game season. And a lot of people wrote us off before the year, as you both know, and we've spoken
hmm
about in previous months. And I'm just so grateful that the team, with a new coach, new system, several new faces, several guys that were mainstays like Gazdag, Jack McGlynn, and others, departed the club, and Jack Elliott, and we sorely miss them. But I'm so happy for Bradley Carnell, the staff, these players who had a chip on their shoulder from last year to get to this point, and all the accolades they achieved to lift that trophy, and in front of all the fans too.
Nobody expected the Union to have the supporter shield this year. If you had to choose one, and I know you don't want to choose one, what was the most important piece of this? Was it the general manager's work, or was it the coach putting into place a plan?
Well, I would say number one, that Ernst had to make the right hire, right? The sporting director. So that's definitely part of it, Jeff. And number two, it's the buy-in from the players that have been here, right? The veterans like Bedoya, like Lesnes, like Wagner, like Andre Blake, into the new coach, right? And you have to give Bradley Carnell and his staff. His data guy, Sean Rooney, does a great job. Mitch Hildebrand, assistant coach. Then the coaches that were retained, goalkeeping coach Phil Wedden, Frank Licht, assistant coach who specializes in set pieces, Jay Cooney in the video, amongst others, Stephen Pauly, Phil Watson from the athletic training department. And I would say that, the implementation of from the coach from the top down, there was just the buy-in from when they went to Spain in January for preseason, where they were starting to get to know each other to this point. So I put a lot on. I put a lot on the coach. Did it in 23 with St. Louis, getting the 1 seed out of the West as an expansion team. Does it here with the Union, but I also put a lot on the players too. The team just quickly. Um, you get a road record 8 wins this year on the road. You give up the least amount of goals, 35. For me, the difference has been defensively. We were way more stout and resolute this year than last year. How many leads did we give up at the end of games last year? How many goals did we relinquish early on in games? Blake was only healthy, 13 league games last year. And this go around, totally different. 14 clean sheets, only allowing 35 goals all season long. We never lost more than 2 consecutive games. Just think about that all year long. When we lost, we responded, we were resilient. And that to me was key. You only lost one home game this year on March 16th against Nashville, a 3-1 result. You make the Open Cup semifinals. Granted, we only played 2 competitions, which I think helped this team: Open Cup and also league play. We weren't in Leagues Cup, we weren't in CONCACAF Champions Cup. That helped. And then the depth of scoring, 18 different goal scorers this year. It says a lot about the makeup of this team and the results that they put out.
You talked about the buy-in. What exactly was the buy-in? What was so different about this team than it was under the past couple of years under Curtin?
Yeah, well, I would say, for one, I would say that Bradley didn't try to do too much differently from my conversations with the staff and with players. He respected what was here from a lot of the guys that I mentioned, and some of the new faces coming in, like an Indy Vassilev, they bring in from St. Louis, like a Milani Lasky from San Diego Nordjylland out in Denmark, and then others down the line. Watu Makanya doesn't play at all, Jeff, to your question, just answering it pointedly, under Jim Curtin. He's a stud as a center back next to Jacob Glesnes. They move on from Jack Elliott, who's a dear friend. To me, that's one that's totally different. Um, the the two number sixes, Danley, now in his second year with the Union, playing a first full season, and Jovan Lukic, unknown commodity coming from Serbia. That's another position. Previously, Jim and the staff had Jose Martinez, who held it down, and then he was transferred to Corinthians. And Jovan Lukic has been a delightful watch, in my opinion. Can aid in the attack, put out fires. I like when the two sixes defensive midfielders get advanced and help out the tens, get on the same line as our attacking players, can shoot from distance, can make that final pass. I think that helps. And then lastly, I'd say, look at the run that at the surge that Ty Baribo made. Under the previous staff, just call it what it is, Baribo didn't play at all in the beginning part of the year. It took him till League's Cup for him to get on, and then he flourished. This year, granted, he's not scoring right now at the rate he did earlier. He was once the Golden Boot leader. He has 16 goals. Um, he scored in the All Star game. The prior staff, didn't play him at all at the start of the year. And Baribo's there. You had a Bruno Damiani this year as well as a name that I didn't mention previously. So there's a lot of similarities on what the staff's doing and a lot of differences. And then lastly, I'll end with this. Last year, the Union um, got more on the ball, possession based. And they kind of went away from the methodology that I think the sporting director, Ernst, and the staff kind of wanted from the top down, from the first team, second team to the academy, playing more now without the ball, being more rapid in transition this year. Bradley will tell you won 60% of his goals in transition, 30% on set pieces, 10% in possession. And I think that's the difference there too. In transition, we're much better. We're winning the ball higher up the field. Our press is electric, and it depends. The press can wrinkle how they want to go about it, depending on the scout. But there's, again, in summation, similarities and plenty of differences from the 24 Union, who did not make the playoffs for the first time since 17, to the one that's a one seed this go
You're
around.
you're describing depth with this team that we haven't seen, and that even if we had it, never got on the field. I mean, you got 25 different players appeared in the starting nine over the course of this season. And so, whether or not that would have happened with injuries or not, you go in, even though you have some injuries going in, and they're actually not sending Kevin Sullivan to the under 17 now because they may need him given some of the injuries they've had. But you have guys who have gotten on the field all season who aren't going to be surprised when the lights turn on. Talk about how important that's been in terms of getting guys some experience under some pressure this year.
Yeah, we didn't have depth last year. That's another one. And this year, that has really, really helped us out. The Quinn Sullivan injury is a tough one because Quinny was having such a good year. He had a great season a year ago. This year, the type of guy that can kind of play make on his own, shoot from a distance. You guys know the rocket right foot that Quinn has. You mentioned his brother Kevin getting in games, played the most minutes last game in Charlotte, even though that was a defeat. Um, and then you have guys that can come in off the bench and can make the impact. If you need Jesus Bueno to put out a fire, he will at a central midfield position or at the number six or at the number eight. What I'm getting at, could also play the 10 in my mind. Bueno can do that, and Ali Bedoya as well. Bedoya was a guy that they bring back. Didn't know kind of what his role would be from maybe last year, more of a starting role to this point, starting, not starting. I think it was his ninth or 10th start in Charlotte. He's also played some right back, which he did in a 1-0 win in April in Chicago. Um, and he's been terrific in the role that he's had. And I think a lot of the guys feed off of Ali's energy, insight, and experience. And you got to credit him as the player and also the man, not really starting all the time anymore this year. but everything is kind of fed through him, or if Blake wears the armband, or if it's Jacob Glesnes. I mean, Glesnes is a candidate, a finalist for Defender of the Year. How about Jacob, from going from a hernia surgery? The year starts and ends on an own goal, and this year an all-star, totally bounce back year, very resilient, and a great guy who the Union actually extended this year. Chris Donovan can come in off the bench, and then you have three strikers up top, aside from Chris, in Ua, Baribo, and Damiani. Ua's more your guy that can be vertical, can hit them on a counter. Bruno and Baribo are more similar, that they're lurkers inside the box, one-touch finishers, but Damiani can have that hold-up play where he can kind of box a guy out like Embiid, can spin and fire a shot. Baribo, as you both know, and a lot of your listeners probably do with those flicks, but they just need service. So we need to get those strikers, whoever starts, service. And I think that depth will serve us well, moving forward into the playoffs, when called upon.
How important has Andre Blake been to this team? Not just this season, but for this run, for almost the last decade.
It's instrumental. He's the backbone of the team, Jeff, as you know. He keeps your team in so many games, and it's the organization under the back. I think actually his kicking has gotten better. I know that's the one part on his game where people say, maybe that's just got to improve, and I feel like it has. And then it's just when you need him to make those timely, jaw-dropping saves that I affectionately call brick wall Blake when it happens. Um, it
I have
just
to get a
it's
cut. I have to
contagious.
get a cut of that to drop in when we have
Yeah,
you where you're doing one of your brick wall Blake threes on a save on the radio.
yeah.
Especially with our background.
Oh, I love it. Look. You take him out of the equation last year, and Andrew Rick and Oliver Zimmer were thrust into a situation that both I don't think forecasted nor were ready for, and I'm saying that respectfully. And we missed Andre sorely, and I think if Blake was even 10 games healthier last year, we're in the playoffs last year. So now, when we are about to go on this run, and now, for example, beginning a first round series against Chicago, um, there's no extra time in a best of three, so it goes right to PKs. Where Andre, you may say, it might not be as dominant in PKs as maybe some others, but I still call on his experience late in games to close out a game, because I got to tell you, Chicago, despite where they finished in the league this year, they have a terrific attack, and Blake's going to be called upon to make some big saves. And I think he's the perfect guy to get the job done, and it's a reason why he's been a three-time goalkeeper of the year. He's going to be in our Ring of Honor eventually, next to Seba and probably Bedoya too, and he deserves it. And then a lot of the wins that the Union have had in their history, a lot of them are thanks in part to Andre Blake between the sticks, no doubt.
I texted you during the game the other night asking who I should be rooting for, Chicago or Orlando City. We do get Chicago in the matchup. Union have one of the best defenses in the league. The Fire, you talk about their attack. Hugo Cyphers had 17 goals. He had a brace in the wild card. They're going to obviously try and disrupt that high press system and exploit gaps. Talk about the matchup that the Union have here and how the Union's counterattack is going to have to try and balance that out.
Yeah, I think they have problems in the back. Chicago, they've allowed like 60 goals, which is kind of towards the top in the league for most allowed. I think, San Jose was above 63, somewhere around that threshold. So I think, stylistically, the Union match up against them really well, in that they're going to send numbers forward, and we're going to try to hit them in transition. And I think if we can create those numerical advantages behind the guys in the midfield, I think that will be key. What Greg Berhalter has done, for those that haven't followed Chicago, former, of course, U.S. men's national team coach, former Columbus coach, in that they've tinkered their formation. So the other night against Orlando in the wild card game, they played with a back four, but they did go with a back three, or you can call it a back five as well. So we'll have to see what Greg does tactically against the Union. Several teams, and remember last year, were going at a back three against the club, kind of like Cincinnati would do against us, right? Um, so, if that's the case, and they're going to use wing backs, I look to hit them into the wide areas and try to get behind them as much as we can. If we are successful in the width of the field and not just rely on crosses from like a Kai Wagner, for example, whoever starts at right, whether it's Frankie Westfield or Nate Harriel, but from others like Ua into space. I think he can get like a Jack Elliott isolated or a Joel Waterman who they traded for from one of the Canadian teams now as a center back with them. I think we can beat Chris Brady. I will tell you that their attack is very, very good. And you mentioned their potent goal scorers. Hugo Kuiper's up top, Philip Zinkernagel coming from Switzerland, Brian Gutierrez, a U.S. Youth International, has a terrific outside shot as well. Jonathan Bamba, speed. He's a left winger for them. Maybe not the best finishing product from him, from what I've talked to with other people who know Chicago well, but it's a team that scores. It's a team that scores but gives up, and I think the Union know how to play them. So we've shut out them twice this year. Bruno Damiani scored on a penalty in the earlier matchup this year at Soldier Field. We beat them 4-0 at our place. To me, even though I'm the Union broadcaster, I throw that out the window, and this is the playoffs now in a best of three. And they're coming in here, short rest, fired up after their win over Orlando, which kind of surprised me. Is like they kind of like sat back a little bit, absorbed. I don't see Chicago doing that on the road. A lot of teams have said, Union, you're a team that doesn't like to play in possession. Here's the ball, go break us down. I would be surprised knowing what I know of Chicago tactically that they would do that. They would sit in a low to mid block and say, Union, you have the ball, play out of the back and go try to beat us, string 4 or 5 passes. I don't think they're going to do that in the matchup. I could be wrong. And that's what makes this coaching chess match really fun to watch. And I'm excited to see what Bradley Carnell and his staff do to try to beat them, win the midfield battle, hit them in transition, and hopefully we can score early at home, which I hope will be a great crowd on Sunday.
Last question that I have. Messi just signed an extension.
Yeah.
How important has he been to the league? And going forward, does he remain as important, or is the MLS in just good standing with or without him?
I think, look, I think, he's the best player in the world. Every matchup that he plays in, especially when it's on the road, is, and I'm saying this in the nicest way, it's like a circus. It's crazy. Um, Even in my area, I'm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, about close to an hour north of the stadium in Chester, and I can tell you, there's so many Messi jerseys out there. And look, it brings notice, visibility, awareness, publicity to MLS. I'd like to see some of those kids wearing Messi jerseys, Union jerseys. And I tell my 5-year-old son Hudson that we talked about, I say there's Messi, and I tell him a little bit about Messi and maybe what is it him or is it Ronaldo the best? Um, so I think from that standpoint, to kind of elevate MLS or just soccer in the United States, it certainly helps. And this is my journalism background talking, not even being with the union here. I think as Miami moves forward with him, what do they do? Well, he's the Golden Boot winner. I think he scored 27 goals in the regular season. Played a ton, was injured a little bit. They're in a first round match against Nashville, so every game's going to be crazy that he's at. Maybe we'll face them in the Eastern Conference Final, which would be at our place. Thank goodness they're all on the other side of the bracket. You got Hella's real rivalry, Columbus, Cincinnati, Nashville, Miami. All those teams can beat up each other on the other side of the East. And we got Chicago, and then either the winner of Charlotte, New York City, God willing, we advance. So I think for the World Cup, Messi's going to help. Just because it's in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. For Miami, Miami just needs to get younger, and they need to get better defenders. Those guys up top are gone, I believe, retiring. Luis Suarez, the guy in the middle, Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba. So it's going to be different around Messi. So they're going to get younger around him, in my opinion. They're going to get better defensively because speaking with a lot of my colleagues in the business, they don't defend successfully all that much, Miami, but they kind of outscore their problems like a Messi. So, I outweigh the good than the bad, Jeff and Jason, with him. And if it's a matchup where he's coming to Chester, it's going to be the biggest story, like it was a couple of years ago
God.
with League's Cup.
It'll be crazy there if they play them there in the Eastern
You
Conference.
guys were watching from the bridge, straddling the Commodore Barry Bridge. I'll never forget looking from the booth through my binoculars, watching that Leagues Cup semifinal where he first came to MLS in 2023. Straddling the bridge, watching this guy. I'm seeing uh, grown adults crying, seeing him for the first time. I mean, that's just from a sporting perspective. Uh, just the impact that figure, that legend makes. So I think for MLS, look, they don't want this to be, Jeff, as you know, they don't want it to be a retirement league anymore. But when you have the chance to bring him on, and you got the Apple TV money, you got the Adidas money, and he can bring in folks from around the world to follow MLS who wouldn't give us any semblance of time. I think it helps more than it hurts, in my opinion. But the next step is for me, and again, I'll end it with this. I just want to see MLS get younger and retain a lot of the young, promising players, even from the union standpoint, as
So
opposed
does
to just
Jeff.
departing for Europe.
So does Jeff.
Yeah,
We don't have time to get into it, but you've hit on a hot button for Jeff that he loses his mind.
I'm
We
in
will let
agreement.
you,
I'm in
we will
agreement.
let you go and hope this is the start of a fun run. If you're watching on Apple TV, since the Union are home, you can listen to Dave Leno too, which is awesome. It's synced up to the video. Dave, look forward to talking to you as this goes on, man. Thanks for the time.
Jason, Jeff, continue to do great things. Congrats on all your work on this platform and go Union. Let's get back to MLS Cup and let's win it this time.